Dawnbringer, Book 2, Chapter 11, The Thinnest Thread of Hope. Eldarian's heart stirs him awake as deep anguish settles upon him like an incalculable weight begging to be borne. And were it not for the preceding peace, which even now does not depart, holding him at the very foundation of his awareness, deeper than thought or feeling, he would be crushed by the feelings that now flow into him. He sits up and leans against the wall, resting his head against the cool stone. The corridor is now quiet, filled with sleeping bodies and lit only by a few torches along the walls, sending their flickering light in reddish-orange and casting long shadows on ceiling and floor. At this moment, he hears footsteps approach and looks up to see Elmarie drawing near, her eyes flowing with tears and an expression of deep sorrow and pain upon her face. Without words, she collapses before Eldarian, and he draws her into his arms, burying her face against his chest. Together they silently hold and are held, as they carry the pain of a hurting city on the brink of collapse.
Pull back! Pull back!
Roraine cries in command to his men, knowing that resistance in the courtyard is no longer possible. If they try to remain, they shall be hewn down to the last man. Therefore those that remain quickly withdraw beyond the second arch, separating the city from the courtyard and the outer defences, and behind them the heavy iron portcullis slams shut, closing out the Imperial forces, at least for the moment.
The door! Close the door as well!
Shouts a man near Roraine, and soon a few soldiers push shut the thick wooden doors of the gate and lay a reinforced beam across it, sealing it closed.
Good, that shall hold them for a while. But it is only a matter of time until they bring the ladders to the second wall if they do not break through the door first.
Roraine takes a step away from the door and draws in a deep breath, trying to lay hold any thread of thought which could lead him to the awareness of what to do next. But as he does so, he hears a voice from behind him, calling his name. He turns and sees the commander, Heroism, approaching.
"We have lost the gate and the first wall,"
Roraine says as he approaches.
"Only the second gate and the inner wall still restrain them from pouring like a flood through the city."
"Then you fare better than other sections of the wall,"
Heroism answers.
"There are more defences here, and so you have been able to hold them off more effectively. To both your west and your east, the single wall was all that held them. We fight now in the streets themselves."
"What would you have me do?"
Roraine asks.
"I fear we have little hope to hold them off."
"We have no hope, my friend,"
says Heroism.
"Even though the Druidak have departed, we have already suffered a fatal blow to our resistance. Our numbers are too thinned, and too many have been wounded or slain."
"What can we do?"
"I go to request a parley."
Heroism responds.
"I mean to surrender and to ask for peace."
"But they shall want the city,"
says Roraine.
"It is better than allowing them to burn and slaughter until we are on our knees and have no choice except death or surrender."
Rolain shakes his head in frustration, but after a moment of thought he says,
I fear that you are right.
There is no doubt.
The commander replies, and looking keenly at Rolain, he says,
I am not willing to sacrifice my people.
With this, he turns away and ascends the stairway to the top of the inner wall, and raises a white banner high in the air, crying out in words pleading for a cease in the conflict, so that he may speak to the leader of the imperial forces. It is a while before his gestures and his words begin to calm the combat that has now reached a frenzy of intensity between the two armies, like a ripple gradually spreading from those who stand nearby to those who are far away. But at last, everything becomes still and quiet, though the air vibrates with tension on both sides of the conflict. Some words echo from across the wall, which Rolain cannot hear, and then Herzir descends the stairs that he had just climbed.
I go to speak to their commander,
he says loudly to those around him.
I wish 2 captains to accompany me.
Then after a pause he says,
Faltering, Rolain, please come with me.
Aye, Commander,
says another of the captains from 10 yards off, and he quickly steps forth from the crowd of men. His armor is stained with blood, though not his own, and he rests a heavy studded mace against his shoulder. In his other hand is a great shield with the crest of rovers upon it. Upon his head rests a leather helm, plated with iron. Next Rolain comes to Herzir and says,
I know not why you wish for such a new captain to go with you, but I shall not depart from your side.
do we walk into the midst of the enemy forces to speak with their leader?
Asks Faltering.
Why does he not draw near to speak to us?
He probably wishes to emphasize his power and, assuredly, to safeguard his own well-being.
By endangering our own?
Precisely, but we have little choice,
says Herzir.
I am sorry, but let us go.
Together the men then turn to the wall and ascend the steps. There is no point of access to the wall from within the courtyard, and they are unwilling to open the gate, so a rope ladder is thrown down, and they climb down it into the mass of imperial soldiers. These step aside to make room for them as their feet touch the ground, and then they part to make a path to the north, out of the city and into the plain.
At least some honor still lives among the soldiers of the Empire,
Herzir says under his breath.
They restrain themselves from slaying us in cold blood.
The column between the imperial forces leads the 3 men 100 or so yards past the wall until they come to a stop before a man bearing the armor of a commander, glistening steel plate, with long hair braided and knotted on either side of his face. He is clean-shaven, though his face looks neither young nor old, only stern, proud, and immovable.
Are you the commander of the Imperial forces?
Herzir asks, with a slight bow. Though it pains him to do so, Rolain joins Faltering in bowing as well.
I am,
says the man, leaning upon his shield and looking at the men with satisfaction.
My name is Erindas Dr. Larendon. From thence I hail, and long have my sires ruled over the people of that city and its surrounds.
A true Imperial all the way from Valyria,
says Faltering softly.
The quarrelsome nature of your nation has necessitated my arrival.
Erindas says, as if by way of explanation.
Why do you continue to fight when you are clearly defeated?
Why do you ally yourselves with inhuman creatures of despicable wickedness?
Herzir asks in reply.
Such was not my choice.
Erindas says.
Not all orders originate in myself alone. I am a man under orders just as much as I am a man who gives them. Surely you yourself know this.
And I come to you to plead with you to spare the lives of the citizens of Ristfand, to spill no more innocent blood.
Herzir says vehemently.
If you do it not out of pity, do it at least out of strategic consideration. We wish to lose no more life unnecessarily, and we are willing to speak with you about the terms of our surrender, relying upon your clemency, whatever measure of that you may have.
Surely you have already achieved your goal.
Faltering interjects.
The rebellion in the city has been crushed, and our will to stand against the Empire has been extinguished. There is no more for you to fear from us. Your duty is already done.
What do you know of my duty?
Replies Arindus angrily.
What do you know of our goals in besieging this city?
What other goals could you possibly have?
Fulting asks.
Quiet, Fulting,
Says Hersir softly, holding out his hand as though to calm his captain. He then speaks to Arindus.
Let us then converse together. What is it that you seek? Can we not come to terms peacefully?
I came to conquer, and conquer I must.
Replies Arindus shortly.
The only terms are your complete and unconditional surrender. The city shall be ours, under total imperial occupation, government, and control. Hence, it shall be a base for our operations east of the Teldrian and the End Mountains, and all men who refuse to join in the efforts of the Empire shall be punished severely.
He then turns to look over his shoulder and says,
Yinda, step forward.
A man who is clearly a lesser officer and secretary to the commander joins Arindus. Turning back to the three men from Ristfand, he continues,
Where is the leader of your city, that we may make an agreement by which all must abide? That is assuming, of course, that you do not wish to continue the battle and assure the massacre of the entire population.
Our leader and all his court has been slain.
replies Hersir.
I, therefore, alone stand as the current leader over the people of Ristfand.
Well, that is an unexpected boon.
Laughs Arindus.
Not only have we taken the city, but we have beheaded the government of the entire clan of Rovas. For you are certainly not going to replace the slain Jarl and lead these people. The Empire shall make the appointment, and in the meantime I shall assume all authority over the affairs of both city and clan.
Perhaps you don't understand, but the settlements outside of the city, both near and far, live and act mostly independently from the guidance or authority of the Heras.
And perhaps you don't understand, but the leader of the clan has authority over them, whether he has in the recent past exercised it or not. And the Empire has absolute claim over the entirety of the land of Telmerion, as you are our subject and a colony under our leadership. Whatever boons you have from your membership in the Empire would be forfeit were you to resist, and death only would be your reward. Perhaps, at long last, you are beginning to learn such a lesson.
Hersir is silent for a long moment, and then he turns to Rorlane and Fulting. He looks at them with pain lining his face, and many things are exchanged between them without words. Then he turns back to the Imperial commander and says,
Will you give us some time to discuss this among ourselves?
Discuss as you need, though there is little choice.
Answers Arindus.
Report to me by midday tomorrow. Or is that today? Yes, it is already past midnight. Report to me by midday, or I shall make plans to commence the attack with the coming of night.
Diliana, Elmarie, and Syrian sit together in the Grand Master's Redra, taking advantage of a moment of respite in the early morning, just after daybreak, when most of those under their care are still asleep. The sounds of warfare fell silent sometime during the night, and yet no word has come to them concerning the state of the battle. Many persons from the temple, in the nocturnal darkness, had assisted in extinguishing the flames that caught on hundreds of walls or roofs from the arrows shot by the imperial forces. But in the early hours of the morning, this too had grown calm, and all fell into stillness, silence, and waiting.
So much death, in flame and darkness and blood.
Tiliana whispers.
Never in my life have I witnessed such evil and such suffering than in the last few months.
Did you behold the Druidach with your own eyes?
Elmarie asks her.
I did.
She replies,
They came not into the houses of men except from without, but in the streets and alleyways they appeared freely, stepping forth from the shadows, and I was absent from the temple at the time that they appeared.
That I did not know.
remarks El-Marie.
We have had little time to speak about anything these past days.
Tiliana says,
But it was only by a thin thread that I was spared being one of those who lie prone upon the floor of the temple, whether in injury or in death. The former indeed I fear more than the latter, for to join those who have departed before me is a welcome journey. But pain scares me.
How are you saved?
Syrian asks, breaking his silence until this moment.
I was returning from dinner and conversation with Siga, an old friend of mine. Hearing the cries and knowing that the enemies were near the walls of our city, Siga encouraged me to stay with them that night and to return to the temple in the morning. But I saw no danger, not knowing that the enemy, some of them at least, could pass right through the walls and appear in the city itself. I was alone on a small side street when one of the creatures stepped forth from the dark before me. I was more than fortunate at this moment that it was only one and not more, for I was alone and unarmed.
You?
El-Marie begins to ask, but she falls silent, though the import of her question is clear. You fought and defeated it.
The fear of their presence is terrible.
Tiliana whispers,
Suffocating worse than a coil around the neck or water in the lungs. I turned to flee in the opposite direction, but saw similar shapes, though farther away, appearing at the other end of the street. My mind nearly ceased its working in that moment, paralyzed with terror. But I looked around and saw a hay cart only a few steps away with a pitchfork in it. Their horror is worse than their threat, or most of their threat lies in the fear that they induce. It is hard to explain.
I think we understand.
Syrian says encouragingly.
They are unarmed and slow, and if a person is able to overcome the fear that they feel before the Druidach draw near, there is a chance, even for the untrained, to fell them.
Unless they come in great numbers or one finds oneself unarmed.
Tiliana sighs.
And by the favour of the gods, I was spared both of these. I needed only face a single one to clear the path of my escape.
And that you did.
El-Marie finishes for her. Tiliana nods silently, saying,
And then I ran all the way here with my arms and legs trembling so badly, and my heart pounding so violently, that I feared I would collapse in the street. Once I was safe within the walls of the temple, and as the night progressed, I became ever more keenly aware of my fortune, and that I had been in the street when what was soon to become a flood was but a trickle.
She looks at her two confrères with both pain and gratitude in her eyes, and then says, by way of conclusion,
Twice now has the preciousness of my own existence been impressed upon my heart, and in the very face of death, life has been handed to me.
And I am deeply grateful that it has been so on both occasions,
says El-Marie.
I do question why, though.
Adds Tiliana.
I mean, why is it that I have been spared, and not once but twice, while so many others have fallen at the hands of men and beast?
Do you speak of anyone in particular?
El-Marie asks with as much delicacy as she can, thinking of Tiliana's husband and children.
I do not think the pain of that wound, those many wounds, shall ever heal.
Tiliana says after a long moment for thought. Her face is grave and lined with care and sorrow.
But at the moment my thought is occupied with the many who have suffered at the hands of those who lay siege to our city, those whose anguish and death we have all witnessed almost constantly since the battle began.
Such pain and such loss, so apparently senseless, raise profound questions in the heart.
Syrian says gently, returning to the question which Tiliana had voiced.
The paths marked out before each person are far beyond foresight or control.
He then continues, not by way of providing some answer or solution, but rather simply as an act of empathy.
Sometimes all that we can do is trust in a wisdom and a sight greater than our own, even if what appears before our eyes seems to be folly or failure.
I understand your words,
replies Tiliana.
but it is hard to find any reason to trust when so many have their aspirations, desires, and very lives crushed by forces of evil, or even by apparent random chance. How can such things, how can evil and circumstance, be the work of goodness?
I do not say that such things are the work of goodness,
Answers Syrian, running his hand slowly through his beard, and in a voice that indicates that he has thought deeply about this, and felt it deeply as well, for many years.
but I do believe that none of it happens outside of goodness or its great weaving.
After these words, the three of them fall silent. It is a few minutes before anyone speaks again. El Marie is the one to break the silence as she says,
The great festival of Sun's Height is only 2 days from now. It is a grievous thought to realize that it shall be a time not of joy and celebration, but of mourning.
Even more, it may even still be a time of battle.
adds Tiliana.
Many of us on that day shall recall the bright banners that clothed the city, and the songs of celebration both in the temple and in the squares, and the evening service in which Rishtfand has been again placed in the hands of the seven through the littlest one. And yet I fear that none of that shall be this year except in memory, and many of us, probably even less than now live, shall still draw breath even to lament on that day.
Despair not.
Whispers El Marie.
Perhaps celebration in lament is the most fitting disposition we can offer right now. And the heart of the festival has always been the service of entrustment. Certainly, that need not be omitted even this year.
But Tiliana also speaks truth.
Syrian adds.
Joy has long been strength for many, and lightness and glad celebration. Were it within my power, I would wish to give at least some measure of this to the hurting people of our city once again. But it may be many turns of the moon before even a small spark is again kindled from the ashes to which war has nearly reduced us.
Do you think, Syrian,
Asks Tiliana.
that we shall live for so many months that such a thing becomes a possibility? Or that in that amount of time anything will have changed, such that sparks can even arise?
I know not the future, but I suspect that this battle shall soon cease,
Syrian answers.
though it may not at all be with the outcome that we wish. The sparks may need to fight suffocating winds for a long time to come, and the flowers of hope and gladness may struggle against a biting chill for many years hence.
As another moment of silence envelops them, Tiliana's thoughts carry her to her husband and children, to Alsenor, Beita, and Anar. Or rather, their faces come before her, vivid and clear and painful, but also so very beautiful. It is a beauty that tears the heart and causes it to bleed. Particularly now, the absence of her 2 children feels like a gaping wound, like a hole in her heart as well as in her womb. So vividly does this feeling strike her that she feels a physical pain in her abdomen, as if their absence from the world of the living, from the space of her love and care, is being reflected in the aching hollowness of her womb, from which they came and in which they were first sheltered and nourished in their life and growth. Tiliana is stirred from her thoughts, not by any words from the other 2, but by the sound of footsteps in the hallway, followed swiftly by a knock on the door of the Redra. Syrian calls out in response.
You may open the door.
When it swings open, they all turn and see the faces of Rawlane and Eldarion as they stand side by side. Rawlane speaks and says,
They are demanding unconditional surrender by the end of the day, or all shall be slain. I have no doubt what the commander shall choose, but I seek your counsel, Syrian, about the path moving forward. Herzir awaits as well in the outer courtyard. We are filthy and stained with blood, and he does not wish to enter the temple as he is.
The temple is a home for the unclean, and it is here that all can be cleansed, not share their uncleannesses like a contagion.
The Grandmaster replies.
but I understand the gesture and will go out to him."
Syrian then rises to his feet and walks quickly to the doorway and steps out into the corridor, shutting the two women alone in his radra. They turn to look at one another, and their eyes meet and interlock for a moment of silence, which seems both to pass swiftly and to linger for an immeasurably long time. In the depths of Elmarier's gaze, Tiliana sees something that she cannot name, but which both challenges her and comforts her deeply, as if she is gazing into wells whose depths she cannot even begin to discern, but which are revealed even by the play of light upon the surface. In response to this gaze, and to her own surprise, she bursts into tears, and the words come to her lips.
"I am afraid, Elmarier. I am deathly afraid."
In response, Elmarier does not speak, but simply reaches forward and wraps Tiliana in her arms and allows her to weep. A good amount of time passes before Tiliana sits back to look at Elmarier again and speaks some more. In a frail and wavering voice, she says,
"It is not only fear but sadness. I am so raw, and I have not been given any space to heal from the prior wounds inflicted upon me before being inflicted with wounds on top of them. And whatever progress I may have made before has all been undone, or at least so it feels. I feel like a total wreckage, like a ruin of broken pieces with hardly any unified personality to hold them together."
Elmarier nods at these words and opens her mouth as if to say something, but after a moment of hesitation, she closes it again. Tiliana, seeing her silence and guessing at least some of its import, continues speaking, slowly and with hesitancy, but clearly.
But even more painful than all of this is the awareness that my pain is not the only pain, that the evil I have suffered in my own life is not the only evil in our world. No, for our city is on the verge of crumbling, and our culture is threatened with collapse or even destruction. So many lives, so many families, so many things both good and beautiful, as if spat upon and besmirched with the violence of forces that I can hardly begin to understand. And for what reason? I don't know what drives the empire, nor what could possibly give rise to creatures of such inexplicable wickedness, creatures whose only purpose seems to be to kill and to destroy. And why would men, human beings like you and me, make a pact with them and join them in warfare against a peaceful people?
I wish I had at least a glimpse of an answer to the many questions that torment you, Tiliana.
Elmarier whispers at last, when the former has fallen silent.
But all I can do is join you in the questions. Perhaps sitting with the questions together, however, is not a waste of time, and our longing and our pain shall become a vigil of expectation that even if a long time from now finds an answer.
Meanwhile, the men hold council together, though their councils concern not whether to capitulate to the demands of the empire, but rather how to continue their resistance, even though surrender is inevitable.
"I fear for our people."
Herzir says, his voice heavy and rough, not only from grief and sorrow, but from shouting orders.
"I wish now that our leader, Glendus, had commanded our people to flee to the east, or even to take refuge with other clans. It would have been better to give up the city than to give up our people. Or at least many of them. Many of them could have been spared. Then only some of us would be facing this terrible fate. I wonder if that course of action would indeed have been wisest."
Syrian replies gently.
Many, in fact, did flee and take refuge elsewhere. Glendus did not hinder those who wished to depart. But you are correct in lamenting the losses our people have suffered, losses we could not have predicted, without knowing the capacity of the Druidach to appear within the very city itself, as if the walls did nothing to restrain them.
The walls did nothing to restrain them, Syrian.
Herzir answers bitterly.
It was a massacre, and the only way to avoid it would have been for the people to flee.
If they can appear at will within the city itself,
Says Rawlane,
then I wonder what prevents them from appearing just as easily within other cities and settlements. We really do not know if fleeing would have saved life, or if it would have weakened our people further. Is fleeing from such creatures even possible?
Fleeing from an imperial army certainly is,
Herzir retorts.
and the Druidach have come as the vanguard of the imperial forces. That much is obvious. I appreciate your efforts to find light in the darkness, but don't you see that terrible things have happened that could have been prevented if only we had known how to prevent them?
But that is precisely the point, Herzir.
Syrian says.
If only we had known how to prevent them, but there was no way we could know. In the future, yes, we shall be able to act upon this newfound knowledge. But the past is no longer within the domain of our action. The questions before us now all concern the present and the future. What are we to do now? Given our current situation, what paths lie open before us? First, how can we save lives and prevent further destruction of our people? And second, how can we prevent the Imperial presence from crushing both our spirit and our struggle?
Yes,
Rawlane says.
for it is clear now that the Empire wishes not just the re-establishment of order, our acquiescence to the power and authority of the Emperor. There is something more at work, though I fear none of us can even begin to guess what it is.
Our real enemy. Eldarion begins, breaking the silence that he has kept until now.
Is not the Empire or its forces, however great. The real enemy is the creatures of darkness, the Druidach and whatever other abominations we may have the misfortune to encounter in the future. We cannot ignore the Empire and its aspirations. That is true, but I suspect that, despite the goals of those in authority, goals of domination and power, the Empire is ultimately but a pawn to powers greater than even the mightiest of men or the most supreme of civilizations.
Even if what you say is true,
Herzir answers.
it is simple truth that we must fight the Empire or learn to negotiate with it. We cannot simply ignore those who seek to conquer and occupy us in the name of fighting the real threat.
You are right.
Syrian says.
But Eldarion is right as well. We need far-seeing vision, or at least minds inclined to the meaning of the events unfolding before us and around us, if we are to walk with wisdom the path before us. And this means that we must discern our response, our resistance, both to the demands and aspirations of the Empire and to the more hidden but more insidious aims of whatever or whoever leads these unearthly creatures.
Do they have aims?
Asks Herzir.
Do they seek anything but death and destruction?
Syrian sighs and rests his head against his hands for a long moment before replying. When he speaks at last, he says,
Those creatures whom you witnessed, the Druidach, it is true that they are mindless beasts, capable of nothing but destruction. They are but tools, weapons, but we should not underestimate or ignore the force that lies behind them and perhaps even fashioned them. I fear that whoever or whatever it is, it in fact possesses an intelligence greater than our own and powers far beyond our comprehension. Even beyond all the might of the Empire, this is what we should fear and the threat against which we must steel ourselves.
I agree with Syrian.
Eldarion says,
Through circumstances that are as painful as they are fortunate, I have spoken with the one who called himself their commander, and he is a being of both incredible evil and of mind, great but twisted. I fear that he is a being more akin to the gods than he is akin to humankind.
Akin to the gods?
Herzir cries.
What do you mean by this? Are we fighting celestial powers in the very domain of Earth?
Long has every man done precisely that in the depths of his own heart,
replies Syrian.
Our battle is never merely with ourselves or with other men, however blinded by the lust for power they may be. Men we must seek to save even as we resist and fight them. But the horizontal battle, the battle across the face of Telmerian, between man and man, brother and brother, is never the only battle. Vertical lines intersect this horizontal plane at every step of the way, though they as a rule remain invisible, using the cloak of darkness and our own apathy as their primary tools. Little has changed now, but that these forces choose to act visibly and to work not only in the shadows, but to step forth and wage war against us openly.
But why?
Rollane asks, his voice strained.
My heart is burdened by the question. Why, if these beings you speak of are always seeking to besiege us, do they only now make themselves present in the way that they do?
To that question, I do not know the answer,
says Syrian sadly.
But I suspect that precisely one of their main tactics is to preoccupy us with 1,000 unanswered questions and thus to prevent us from asking the question that actually matters. The question of our fidelity to the light in the face of darkness and of our resistance to the assaults of evil which seek to threaten all that is beautiful and good in the world. I would also add, Rollane, that even if you have no memory of such creatures ever walking visibly in our world or openly interfering in the affairs of mortals, does not mean that nothing like this has happened before. Much in the past has been clouded in the shadow of forgetfulness or has been twisted by memory, intentionally or unintentionally altered, and I shall study the past, shall contemplate what has come before, in the desire to find light for the present. But it remains true that the only thing that we can do is try to discern the way of the present and the future, and not allow ourselves to be distracted or disillusioned by the myriad questions that, while valid, either simply have no answer or lead us away from focus upon the true struggle that lies before us.
You say the same thing again and yet again.
Herzia replies,
Has wisdom forsaken you that you have no more to say than this? Give wisdom concerning the present rather than insisting again and again that the questions we ask concern the present. Of course, our questions concern the present, but we need guidance and light, not the repeated insistence to ask the questions that we are already asking.
The commander's voice betrays anger, a temper that is on the edge of breaking entirely, though under this anger is a thick strain of fear. Syrian simply nods silently and says,
Then what is the question you ask, Commander?
How do we care for our people now that the Imperial forces shall occupy Ristfand and indeed claim rule over the entire clan of Rovus?
Herzia says, reining in his temper.
Any open resistance shall be met with severe punishment. This much the enemy commander made clear. But I myself cannot capitulate. I cannot play the friend to the enemy. Should I depart now from the city, or should I remain? For either way I am a target, a threat, and they know it.
The same is true for all the forces of resistance within the city.
Rollane adds,
We can either leave the city to its fate and seek to regroup with others who stand against the Empire, hoping someday to retake the city. Or we can hide our resistance in the shadows and seek to undermine the rule of the Empire from within.
I fear that the only result of the second course of action shall be death,
says Syrian.
But the only result of the first course of action, at least in the immediate future,
Rollane rejoins,
is abandoning the people to the unhindered influence of the Empire and its goals.
My path, then, is clear.
Herzia says,
At whatever threat to myself, I shall remain in Ristfand. Little shall I be able to do openly, and perhaps even with caution. My life shall be short. But I cannot simply abandon our people to their fate.
Syrian looks deeply at the commander for a moment, as if gazing into his heart through the eyes of his body, and then says,
I see that you shall not be dissuaded from this path, and I don't know whether it is not indeed the best. But I caution you to remain hidden. It would indeed be best if the Empire thought that you had fled this very day. They shall then expect you to return with a rebel force to try to retake the city. Their expectations shall be turned outward, whereas you can stir up the people and support their resistance from within.
This path is true and wise.
Hersir sighs, his tension beginning to subside at last.
I am glad to finally begin to see my way. But it is fraught with danger. Indeed, it appears to me impossible. It is more likely that I shall be discovered within the first fortnight and put to death than that my efforts shall bear any fruit.
Patience shall be your weapon more than anything else.
Eldarion says,
Patience and trust in the goodness of the people. Trust in their goodness and their desire for freedom. If anything, you are their custodian and the protector of their rights. But this means that your desire for rebellion, or for the immediate departure of the Empire, must be subjected to the protection and well-being of the people. Like a seed planted deep in soil, we must set our hopes in the future by doing the little that is within our power now.
You shall remain and aid me, will you not?
Hersir asks, his question directed not to one man any more than another, but to all alike.
I would like to do so.
Eldarion answers,
But my path leads me elsewhere. The seed that I wish to plant must first be found, if the future we hope for is to come to pass. I do not wish to leave now, particularly when the men and women of Ristfand are bleeding under the agony of so much loss and suffering. But the way before me, too, is clear.
He then proceeds to explain to all present both the light that was entrusted to him and the significance of the previous conversation that he and Syrian had shared concerning the Lightborn and the secret forest of Velasi. He conceals many intimate details, but gives enough information that they can grasp the situation.
I have witnessed the power of this light with my own eyes.
Rorlane says when Eldarion has finished speaking.
And what Eldarion says is true. It is the bane of the creatures of darkness. They dissolve at its touch. It may indeed, therefore, be the best hope that lies before us, and perhaps the only hope. I find great courage in this, as it shows that even though unearthly forces assail us, so too unearthly forces come to our aid. Let us be custodians of this light, and wield it rightly.
You think it shall ever be wielded by more than one man?
Hersir asks.
Is there a way to harness this power that we may all wield it against our common enemy?
That is one of the things that Eldarion goes to discover.
Syrian replies.
He has no foreknowledge of what awaits him, or even any certainty that he shall find anything at all. But he must walk into the unknown nonetheless, in the blind hope that an answer awaits him there, an answer not only to the questions of his own heart, but to the anguish of our people. But such blind hope is in fact anything but blind, even if it sees not even a single step ahead. The earth may be shrouded in darkness, but this does not mean that the starry firmament ceases to shine and to mark out the way.
This Velasi forest.
Rorlane begins hesitantly.
Do you really believe that answers lie there? Answers that justify leaving the people of our land alone in their desperate plight?
Not all who care for the people of Ristfand, for the people of Telmerian, shall depart.
Syrian replies.
Eldarion goes, and a select few shall go with him. The rest shall continue, as it did before he arrived, even if he hopes to return with light to bring hope into the darkness of our time.
But that is the problem.
Rorlane sighs.
It doesn't continue as it did before we arrived. For now the Empire lays its heavy hand upon the people, a hand that, as far as I can see, is placed only to crush and subdue.
Subdue, yes,
Syrian says.
But as long as it does not crush us entirely, there is hope that we may yet throw it off, resisting the yoke the Empire would place upon us, and we must be aware as Eldarion has said, that a threat greater than the Empire is at work here, and that it is this, above all, against which we must be prepared to fight.
If you wish to remain, Rorlane,
Eldarion says softly,
I encourage you to do so. I see that your heart lies with the people, and with the resistance that men like Herzir are giving against the might of the Empire. I go into the unknown with only faith and hope as my guide, and I need few companions for such a journey. On such a path, few are just as good as many, and friends of the heart shall do as well as or better than an army.
At these words, Rorlane is visibly afflicted.
Aye.
He begins, but then falls silent. When he finds his voice again, he says,
But am I not a friend of your heart? And have I not made an oath to go where you go, to protect your life with my own?
You are such, Rorlane.
Eldarion replies,
But I free you from such an oath, my friend. Follow where your heart leads, this I insist upon.
Rorlane runs his hands through his hair and then says quietly,
I shall need some time to think about this before making a decision.
That is only right,
says Eldarion.
But know that you have my support, whichever path you may choose.
I have given my counsel,
Syrian says,
but now my own path also becomes clear, and it is not the one that I expected. I almost assumed that I would remain in the city, but now my heart speaks clearly in a way that I cannot simply doubt or ignore. My path lies with Eldarion, and Elmarie shall go as well. At least the three of us shall depart, and shall do so with haste, since our business is so pressing, and since we do not wish to alert the Empire to our movements, though I doubt that a handful of travellers shall awaken any suspicion.
Rorlane nods at Syrian's words as if trying to gauge their import for his own decision, but he does not speak.
Who shall take your place as Grand Master of the Temple?
Herzir asks, looking at Syrian.
I shall remain Grand Master,
He replies,
though there is another, whom I trust wholeheartedly, to act in my place. You know him, Ilmelhrindas. He shall support you as I have done until my return, if return the gods grant me.
It causes me pain, nonetheless,
Herzir says,
that our people shall be left without support. For our Heras is gone, and I, the rightful ruler of the people of this city, shall go into hiding and concealment. And now the Grand Master of the main temple of the city shall also be departing.
It is your part, Herzir,
Syrian replies calmly,
to find and counsel those who can continue to guide our people, to support them in their pain, and to encourage their firmness and wisdom in resisting the Empire. We alone are not the sole guides and leaders of our people. You do not walk alone, nor need you for a moment consider doing so. I shall speak with you privately about others on whom you may lean and whose assistance you can most certainly expect. But for now, it seems that our counsels are leading us to a path, or rather paths, that promise some hope for the future, for the people of this clan and the people of Telmerion, though the hope is slim.
It seems almost like a fool's hope.
Herzir mutters under his breath.
Sometimes perhaps such hope is the only hope that remains.
Syrian answers just as quietly, though in a far different tone.